Hey friends, how's everyone doing today? Hope you're all having an amazing and super productive day so far. Tamie M coming to you from TamieMCoaching.com, coming to you live. And what I want to talk to you about today is how to spot manipulation in a relationship. How to spot manipulation in a relationship. If we haven't met before, I'll take a quick moment to introduce myself. Again, my name is Tamie M. I am an empowerment coach for women. I help women break free from painful relationship patterns so they can finally experience the love they deserve. And like I said, we're going to talk about manipulation today, which is a big subject, but I'm going to say hello, Joshua. How are you? Thanks for hopping on. Heather, how you doing, sweetheart? Nice to see you. Kate Cox, all the way from the UK. Thanks for hopping on, huh? Nice to see you. Guys, do me a favor. If you're catching me live, drop me a 1 in the comments. If you're catching the replay, drop a 2. And if you're new to my live broadcast, let me know you're new. Let me know where you're coming in from so I can reach out and say hello. So manipulation, big subject, right? Like most of the subjects I tend to be bringing to the table today are these days, they're great big huge subjects and, try and talk about them in a live and condense them down to, something that's reasonable is not always easy, but I'm going to do my best. Manipulation's a big one. And you'd think that by the time we step into adulthood, like other things, we'd be able to spot this. We'd be able to see this coming. And you'd think that if we were on the receiving end of a fair bit of manipulation from our family of origin growing up, we'd be well equipped to be able to see it coming. And oddly enough, based on my own experience and what I live with clients every day, I can tell you that the opposite is true. If we grew up in family of origins that were dysfunctional, which is, by the way, 85 to 95% of us on planet Earth, sad but true. If we grew up in family of origins that were dysfunctional and we were constantly, perpetually on the receiving end of some form of manipulation or many forms of manipulation, the reality is we walk into adulthood being very susceptible to manipulation and being blind to it. We walk into adulthood being very susceptible and being blind to it. Okay, so again, you'd think that we would have learned, right? But rather, what we learn is what we are programmed. We are programmed from 0 to 7, depending on the messages that we received. And if that's the kind of dynamic that you grew up in, where you were being manipulated on many levels, for many of us, that's the case. Different people, different types of manipulation. We receive the messages that it's all our fault, and we're to blame, and we're wrong, and we're broken, and the onus is on us, no matter what we're talking about, no matter what the deal is. And we literally carry this nonsense, this bullshit programming into our adult lives. And I can tell you that, my grandmother raised me. And those of you who know me well know that much. My grandmother raised me. And, relative to the other options, I was pretty freaking lucky to end up with her. But, she did the best she could with the resources she had, and those resources were limited. And she was a poor, uneducated Irish Catholic woman, born in 1912, right? Like, her resources were limited. And her way of managing and controlling and rearing me, the good old-fashioned Irish Catholic way, was to manipulate me with guilt and shame. She meant well, but that's irrelevant. Like, I know the woman meant well, but that's not the point. She manipulated me with good old-fashioned Irish Catholic guilt and shame every single day of my life, right? And that was just the beginning, And like I said, she was well-intended. I share quite openly that I'm a survivor of a number of different kinds of abuse, which has led me to this position of being able to serve women who, aren't out of the fire yet, let's say. And, one of the things that I endured as a little girl from the age of 7 till about 11 was that I was sexually molested by an uncle who manipulated me into silence. And what is not, too uncommon in these scenarios is, of course, it was the last person in the family anyone would ever suspect of such diabolical behavior. But regardless, I was manipulated into silence. So on one hand, I'm being manipulated by my grandmother, who is well-intended and manipulating me with guilt and shame. On the other hand, I'm being manipulated by a so-called trusted uncle into silence and, handed this really awful, disgusting secret to carry throughout my life, right? And I could go on about, the different kinds of manipulation. I mean, that's, pretty good bookends. But, when you grow up in a toxic, dysfunctional, highly narcissistic family, manipulation is going to be coming at you from all angles. And then if you add to it that, like me, not a victim, just the reality, right? We have been victimized. It doesn't mean we have to live our lives as victims once we do our work. So all of this is to say, I'm not saying this is a victim, because I am very much an empowered survivor. But totally lost my train of thought there. I can't believe I just did that. Where was I going with that? In terms of growing up in a narcissistic family, dysfunctional family, being manipulated. I don't know what I was going to say. It'll come back to me in a sec, but we are manipulated in many ways by a number of people, which sets us up as we graduate into adulthood to be very susceptible to manipulation. Like, you would think, like I said, that we'd be onto it, but the opposite is true. It's like growing up colorblind. And until you start to learn what manipulation really is, and until you are taught what one color is, one color at a time, you remain blind, right? You remain colorblind. And manipulation is very much the same way. Like, I had to do a lot of work in my adult life to unravel all of that garbage and that crap. And today, I'm so not susceptible to manipulation. I mean, I see it coming and it's like, whatever, right? Like, for years I was like a puppet on strings, dancing, in particular with my family of origin, but even out there in, the business world, in relationships with friends, especially in my romantic life, right? Like, we attract what is a vibrational match to our family of origin wounding until we get to a place where we're sick and tired of doing that and we start doing our own work and shift what we carry, right? So until I did that work for a long time, what I was doing was attracting one after another that just was a vibrational match and treated me the same way. I was reliving the experiences that I had lived in my family of origin, including all of the manipulation. Highly manipulative men I have had in my life. Some of them seriously high on the, on the spectrum of narcissism. Like, I'd go as far as to say not only pathological and malignant, but a couple of close calls with full-blown sociopaths. But definitely had a propensity to attract destructive narcissists into my life. And who's more manipulative than a destructive or pathological narcissist, right? Like, who's more manipulative than a highly narcissistic person, right? So we wonder why we struggle. We wonder why we're, dancing like a puppet on strings in these relationships, yet we're so compelled towards them. And it has everything to do with how we were set up in childhood, how we were manipulated in childhood, how we were programmed in childhood. And, if you're programmed to be colorblind in childhood, you're not going to see color as an adult until you start to learn what color is and the different aspects of color, right? Really, really interesting. And I deal with this one a fair bit with my clients because we don't see it coming. I mean, I remember being well into my 30s and saying to my sponsor at the time, I had an ex-boyfriend come out of the frickin' woodwork after a number of years, as they often would do, and saying, you know, with some ridiculous freaking email. And I had to go over it. I'm a full-grown woman, and I had to go over it with my sponsor to have her help me figure out that this was manipulation. Like, I was starting to wake up at this point in my life, and I was starting to connect some dots, and I was on my road to recovery, and I was doing some deep and some hard and some very serious work, but it didn't happen overnight. And it took time and practice and training and help and coaching and wise counseling from people who actually had a clue to help me start to get it. Today's a whole new world where, like I said, we see it all the time, right? I don't engage with it. I don't respond to it. You know, if someone's trying to manipulate me into feeling responsible for their feelings or their behavior, honey, like, you know, you're barking up the wrong tree today. You're about 15 plus years too late, really, quite frankly, right? And I want to talk about this today because so many of you out there are still really highly susceptible to manipulation. And it's a painful place to be. It's a painful place to be. So I wanted to dive into this subject and, you know, discuss a little bit so that you can start to wake up to it and become less susceptible to it. And part of that is understanding what happened back there to set you up to attract this into your life today. What happened back there to wire you, to program you in such a way that this is what you're a vibrational match for today? Because once you start to connect those dots and heal that stuff, you can start cutting those cords and being a whole lot less susceptible to the bullshit that's coming at you. You know, just because they say it doesn't make it true, right? Especially if you're dealing with, you know, really sick people or destructive narcissists. Like, just because they say it doesn't make it true and doesn't mean it has to land. And if it's landing and we're being affected and therefore manipulated, it's because we still have an unhealed part of ourselves that can attach to. Once those wounds are healed, that shit hits the floor. It doesn't land. It doesn't attach. And that's where you want to be. That's where you want to be. Now, what I did was I kind of cheated a little bit, not a lot, but I went back into, you know, I've got files of like old content that I've used, and this is some bullet points that I pulled from a fellow coach, actually, who was talking about this, I don't know, a year and a half ago, and I really liked what she had to say. So I shared it with my audience, and I pulled from it again today. I thought, you know what, I'm going to share it again because I agree completely, and I'll add my 2 cents in, as I always do, as I go through it. But I think she did a really good job of explaining, you know, what this is like and what we need to be looking for. So my fellow coach, her name is Amy Fiedler, and she does really good work. And here's what she has to say about spotting manipulation in relationships, or what she said anyway about a year and a half ago when I was taking notes. So she says, people who are manipulative will blame you for their actions. People who are manipulative will blame you for their actions. And if we're talking about destructive narcissists in your life, we know they are highly manipulative, right? Like, you know that is on the list of, you know, traits that you need to be looking out for, right? So they're going to blame you for their actions. They're going to behave like complete and utter arseholes in your life and then make it all about you. And I remember for years that being my Achilles tendon. Still to this day, sometimes I can get pretty pissed off when, depending on who it's coming from. Not a good thing to do with me. Behave like a shit in my life and then try and blame it on me. You're not going to get a good response. For the most part, I rise above and I walk away. But, you know, sometimes, like, that's how deep of a wound that has been in my life. I grew up in a family of origin from cradle onwards, including a pathological mother who walked out of my life when I was in diapers, by the way, and then blamed me for it. It was my fault when I was an adult, re-engaging with her. She was the victim in that whole situation, which is fascinating how people can, like, how do you do that? How do you manage to do that kind of a magic trick? That's just an example. There's a million ways that this can be done to us, right? But that was my big Achilles tendon, what do they call it? Like the Achilles heel, the Achilles tendon, my sore spot, my soft spot. People behaving inappropriately and blaming it on me. Not okay. If you've got someone doing that in your life, it is some of the worst form of emotional and psychological abuse, and you need to put some distance and some space between you and them until they learn how to treat you better. And if they don't learn, then too bad, they're freaking lost. No one has the right to do that to anyone. They will hold you accountable for how they feel. Because you're that powerful. They will hold you accountable for how they feel. Amy goes on to say that manipulation is a way for individuals to choose to stay stuck in their wounds and to feel better. And I have to tell you, some of the really manipulative people that I know today, like I've removed a lot of them from my life in terms of my family of origin and what have you. I just don't do those bullshit dances anymore. But we're human beings on planet Earth, and you're gonna run into folks, right? You're gonna see stuff going on in front of you, and as you become more aware, you're gonna see it for what it is. And always a whole lot easier to see it when it's not directly about you, right? Like when it's going on there and you're observing, right? Well, I observe that, this is very true. This is more often than not people who would rather stay busy playing all kinds of sick, dysfunctional, bullshit, toxic, nonsensical, childish, immature, crazy, sick games in their lives with the people in their lives, whoever happens to be the target of the day or the target of the month, whatever. They'd rather play those games than actually grow up, step back, take responsibility for themselves, and do some of their own personal work. God forbid they should roll up their sleeves and heal and become all that they were meant to be. God forbid. Now, I know that sounds pretty harsh and judgmental, but I get pretty frustrated when folks have access to every tool and resource they could possibly need and they choose to stay stuck. It's frustrating to watch that. Like, come on. Come into the light. Stop the bullshit games and come into the light. We can't control what they choose to do, but we can certainly control what kind of an effect and impact they're having on us and our life. I'm going to take a breather here and say hi. I see a whole bunch of people have jumped on. So Daryl, welcome. Thanks for hopping on. Kay Somji, how are you? Superstar, nice to see you. Thanks for joining. Julie, nice to see you. Caitlin, thanks for hopping on. Angie, Melissa, Tanya, oh my goodness. Shannon, how are you? Nice to see you. So many people. If I missed anyone, my apologies. Thanks for joining. Do me a favor, if you're catching the live broadcast, drop me a 1. If you're catching the replay, drop me a 2. And if you're new to my live broadcast, let me know you're new. Let me know where you're coming in from so I can reach out and say hello. So, where was I? Yeah, great big huge tangent, right? I just riff, and hopefully you guys find value in what it is that I'm sharing. That certainly is my intention. So manipulation is a way for individuals to choose to stay stuck in their wounds to feel better. I get it. Rolling up our sleeves and doing the hard work of taking responsibility for ourselves and what's going on in our lives is a whole lot more uncomfortable initially than taking responsibility for ourselves and continuing to manipulate other people and use other people as scapegoats. And I get that it's uncomfortable and daunting initially. So people often choose to just stay stuck in their wounds to feel better. It takes courage. It takes courage to roll up your sleeves and do the hard work, which is why I honor the clients that I get to work with on a daily basis, because I get the balls it takes to actually step into the recovery work, whatever that is specifically for you. They use you as a scapegoat for their pain. Manipulative people use you as a scapegoat for their pain. In dysfunctional families, there's a whole bunch of roles. Maybe I'll do a live on this later this week. There's a whole bunch of roles that people end up playing. You know, there's always the hero, the enabler, right? The lost child, and the scapegoat. I got to be the family scapegoat. Many of you watching also got to be the family scapegoat. Not a pleasant place to be. The sicker your family, the less pleasant that is, for sure. So my heart goes out to many of you. And what it is, basically, is one of the worst forms of manipulation. What it is, you know, rather than a dysfunctional family looking at what the real issues are, one person, usually a child, for me it started when I was 5. One person, usually a child, is singled out as the problem, and they get to be the dumping ground. They get to be the garbage bin. They get to be the token problem of the family. Like, let's not look at what's really going on. Let's not look at what that kid lived from 0 to 5 that maybe now he or she is starting to act out, or 12 or 15 or whatever it is, right? They get to be the family scapegoat rather than the family actually looking at what's really going on and addressing their issues. All the focus and attention, negatively so, goes on the child that's being scapegoated. Like, I remember being carted off to a therapist when I was 5 because I was acting out, but like no one was doing anything about what was really going on. And as an adult looking back, knowing what the hell what was really going on and what that 5-year-old kid had lived from 0 to 5, like, holy cow, right? But this is what happens to so many of us who grow up in dysfunctional families. The more dysfunctional, the more manipulative, and the more you will be scapegoated. And if you don't heal those issues, what happens is you get to live that out more and more and more, usually with greater and greater intensity as the years pass in your adult life. You were scapegoated in your childhood. You're probably still the family scapegoat if you still have anything to do with them. And whether you do or not, in other areas of your life, you are the scapegoat. You get to be the one on the receiving end of their projected pain, their projected shortcomings, their projected appalling behavior that they don't want to acknowledge or look at, their projected shadow. You get to be the one who gets to be the garbage bin for all of that. And then, like I said, that continues into our adult lives until we step back and do our work. So really important for you to recognize whether or not you've been the family scapegoat and are still being scapegoated in your adult life. Where did it happen? By whom? How? How did it make you feel? And what's happening in your life today that's matched to that? Connect those dots. That's the beginning. That's the beginning. Start to turn the freaking lights on and see it for what it is. And when you heal your stuff and someone projects their garbage at you, it won't even land. It'll go right by you. But until you heal your stuff, it's like you have magnets and it has a place to land, right? No fun. So Amy, my fellow coach, goes on to say, you take the blame because you've been taught and therefore always think it's your fault. You've been programmed. You punish yourself for other people's behavior and hold yourself accountable for their thoughts, feelings, words, and actions. We have been so programmed and conditioned to believe from such a young age that it is our fault. We have been so manipulated and are therefore so susceptible to manipulation. We believe it is our fault. We hold ourselves accountable, as Amy says, for thoughts, feelings, words, and actions of others. We take on shit that has nothing to do with us. Has nothing to do with us. It feels heavy and gross, and yes, the manipulator will convince you how wrong you are if you resist taking on what they're tossing your way. So if the initial manipulative ploys don't work, then they'll just come at you with more intensity, how wrong and bad you are. You don't have to get any of that stuff on you. Like, that's a choice. You don't have to get any of that stuff on you, my friend. And I'm sorry will start with an underhanded dig or some bizarre twist. It'll start with an underhanded dig or some bizarre twist. Like, for example, well, you were mean too, but I forgive you and I'm sorry. Well, we were both wrong. I behaved like a complete and utter asshole in your life, but yeah, we were both wrong. Well, you did X and you said Y, but I'm sorry. That, my friends, is not a real apology. If someone is apologizing out of one side of their mouth and making it about you on the other side, out of the other side, that's not a real apology. That's not a real apology. Do not accept that. It's bullshit. Total bullshit. You see how they attack and or blame and then apologize. That's a clear sign of psychological abuse. If you see that happening, you know, I had someone, I mean, it wasn't a big deal. He wasn't that important. Someone who was on my team last year when I was still building a network marketing company who did something that was so unbelievably shocking. Like, it was, I mean, it was shocking. Like, couldn't even believe that it happened given the big picture, you know, like, it was so shocking. And I just very gently went to him and was like, what gives? Like, what, like, wow. Like, what was that about, right? Like, that seemed like a full-blown attack out of nowhere. And he was all innocent and couldn't believe that I took it that way. And it was like, it was anyone who looked at that situation who had a clue was like, wow, wowza. And his form of apology was, yeah, you're right. It was a stupid thing to do, and I'm sorry, but I really hope you're not actually that sensitive, because if you are, we're going to have a really hard go of it. Wow. Wow. And I share that story with you, not because it's not important in my life. This is not someone who even registers on the radar. That was a lot of information about who he was. But this is the kind of shit people try. Manipulative people, low-functioning people, sleepwalking people, wounded, hurting people for sure. Hurt people. Destructively narcissistic people do to other people if you let them. Don't let anybody get away with that kind of bullshit. Needless to say, he didn't get very far with that. Needless to say, wow. And that was the end of that. And what, like what a loss on your part, buddy. Like, what a loss on your, I think I'm a pretty fabulous friend to have. I really do. Your loss. What do you want me to tell you? Can I control the stories around that story that he's out there doing what they do, right? You know, then they can't control you, so then they try and control how everybody else sees you. Can I control that? No, I couldn't give a flying fuck. I don't care. Like, we have to get to that place where we see it. That's really a whole lot of information. Okay, that's really disappointing. We communicate calmly and clearly what it is that we need to say. We set a healthy boundary, and then we step out of the way. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. You don't get to do that twice in my life. I don't care who you are. You don't get to do that twice in my life. You know, we have to love ourselves enough that we're willing to take care of ourselves, because if we don't, nobody else will. If we don't, nobody else will. So, Amy goes on to say that a genuine I'm sorry takes full accountability for their actions. The apologizer did, said, thought, felt, and validates how the other must be feeling due to it. Look, I drop the ball, I make a mistake. Even if my side of the street is this and their side of the street is this, I'm going to own my side of the street. And as a full-blown, emotionally healthy adult who doesn't need to manipulate, who doesn't need anybody else's approval, I can own my side of the street and clean up my side of the street and let them deal with their side of the street. And if they're not big enough or healthy enough or strong enough to own their side of the street and clean up their mess, that's not my problem. That's not my problem. We can't force people to apologize to us and apologize to us appropriately. We can communicate clearly the effect that their behavior is having on us, and we can set boundaries. That's what we can do. Take care of our side of the street. An inauthentic I'm sorry blames and or attacks, tosses in a oops, sorry, and invalidates that you should be hurt or upset by anything that happened. Invalidates that you should be hurt or upset by anything that happened. If you feel it, it's true for you. Now you're responsible for your feelings, and you're responsible for how wounded you are walking through life. And if you're such a wide open, gaping wound that the slightest breeze, is excruciating, it's your job to heal that stuff. No one else is responsible for your feelings. It's not for anybody else to invalidate what you feel either. Feelings aren't facts, but if you feel it, it's true for you. And if you've got someone in your life telling you you shouldn't feel that way because XYZ happened 30 years ago, that is not a safe person. That is not a safe person. That doesn't mean you can't have anything to do with them, but maybe you don't bring your deepest, darkest stuff to that person because they can't handle it well. Anyone who invalidates your feelings, whatever they are, is not someone you bring your feelings to. You have a right to your feelings. A manipulator will have you thinking you're to blame for their actions and your actions. A manipulator will have you thinking you're to blame for their actions and your actions, even if you took no action at all. Your non-action will be blamed. Bottom line is there's an agenda there, and the agenda is to avoid accountability and responsibility at all costs and to make you feel guilty and shamed and wrong and bad more often than not, right? There's an agenda there. And if that's what you're dealing with someone who's probably low empathy, lacking in conscience and empathy to some degree, whatever that is, and you'll never win with them. You'll never win with them because if you are a high empathy person, which most people who tune into my stuff are, if not a full-blown empath, you're playing the game of life by a different set of rules than they are. So don't try and win. It's like playing with a tar baby. You're wasting your time. Get out of there. Get out of there. Love yourself enough to just get the hell out of there. Amy goes on to say that this can be crazy making. Crazy making, just talking about it makes me feel crazy sometimes. Can you tell? Until we wake up and begin to see it for what it is crazy making. It is crazy making. I spent the first 2 or 3, easily 2, definitely 3 decades of my life feeling crazy, to be honest with you, to some degree, because I had been so manipulated, was so susceptible to manipulation. I was living my life from an outside in perspective rather than an inside out perspective, meaning I was so manipulated and such a puppet on strings that I was constantly looking for approval and validation to come from the outside. You know what that does? That makes us a great big huge fabulous freaking target for destructive narcissists. Fabulous target for a destructive narcissist. If you're looking for approval and validation and for your sense of self, your self-esteem to come from anywhere but deep down in your own core, you're in trouble. You're in trouble. And you're a magnet for the worst kind of manipulators. We need to be operating from an inside-out perspective. Don't walk into a room and wonder what everybody thinks about you. Walk into a room, take a deep breath, knowing you're fine, and decide what you think about them. You decide, feel your feelings. That person feels good to me. That person makes me feel crazy, like my family of origin used to. Not anymore, but used to, right? Pay attention to that stuff. Before we start doing our own work, we are often so wrapped up and concerned in what they think of us. Who cares? Who cares? Human beings on planet Earth, most of which have not done anywhere near any personal work on themselves. We're so worried about what they think of us. Meanwhile, their noses are in their navel and they're just thinking about themselves. They don't think about us, honestly. inside out perspective, not an outside in perspective. I have the sniffles, bear with me. I need a tissue. Okay, and a sip of water, and we will continue on here and coming close to the end. Guys, I hope you're getting some value out of this. If you like what you hear, drop a comment and let me know what is speaking to you. What is it that I've said that's really resonating for you? If you're catching it live, drop me a 1. If you're catching a replay, drop a 2. And if you're new to my live broadcast, let me know you're new. Let me know where you're coming in from so I can reach out and say hello. All right, so where were we? So what do you do? What do you do? Like, what if they don't want to change? What if you realize you've got some seriously manipulative people in your life and they don't want to change? What are you going to do? And let me tell you, this isn't always easy, for sure. Sometimes it's easy, no brainer. Usually it's not easy. Usually it's complicated. It's not black or white. There's family involved. There's responsibility involved. There's kids involved. It's a boss. It's a coworker, etc. Right? So this is the kind of stuff that takes practice and dedication and self-love and self-respect and practice and dedication. It really does. It's like a muscle that we developed. So what Amy says in her little spiel here that I'm sharing with you is what you do is you set boundaries. Whether they want to change or not, you set boundaries. And I agree with her completely. One of my favorite ways of doing that, communicating clearly and setting a boundary, when I feel I need you to. When I feel I need you to. When you, insert blank. I feel, insert, whatever it is. I feel scared. I feel targeted and manipulated. I feel uncomfortable. I feel hurt. I feel betrayed. I feel abandoned. Whatever it is. Hey, Marcy, how are you? Nice to see you, girl. And Nermali, how are you? Nice to see you, girlfriend. Thanks for hopping on. Okay, so 2 of my favorite ladies just hopped on, forgive me. So when I feel I need you to is a really clear, succinct, powerful way to communicate what you need to communicate while setting a boundary. I need you to treat me with respect. I need you to follow through on your word. I need you not to gaslight me. Tell me you didn't say something you said or did something you did when I've got, like, we know, like, come on now, right? When I feel I need you to. Silence after that. Say it succinctly, calmly, and then shut up. And what they do in response to that information is going to be a whole lot of information for you. A whole lot of information for you. And then you make your decisions in terms of how you are going to take care of yourself based on that information. They hear you or they don't. If they don't want to change, there's nothing you can do, especially if you're dealing with a destructive narcissist. There's nothing you can do to force that person who, a destructive narcissist, constitutionally incapable of changing, quite frankly. Never mind what they say. Constitutionally incapable of changing. So pay attention to the information, how they take what you say, pay attention to it, and then make your decisions in terms of how you're going to take care of yourself from there. So you set a boundary, and if they break them, you can reset them. Depending on who it is, you might want to give them 2 or 3 chances so that when you do walk away or put distance there, you know you've given it your best shot. They had every chance in the world. You have a clear conscience. You played fair. Doesn't matter what they did, you played fair. So maybe you give them 2 or 3 chances, maybe, maybe not, depends on who it is. And if they break those, you set firmer boundaries. Here's the thing. You are responsible for what you allow into your life. That's the truth. You are responsible. Look, when we were 5 and 10 and 12 and 15, we didn't have a choice. I didn't have a choice when I was 5. I have a choice today. I have a choice today, no matter who it is. And I get that can be difficult if you have been seriously manipulated with guilt and shame. Yeah, if you're an Irish Catholic or Italian or Portuguese, like really, right? Like across the board, right? Many of us were manipulated with guilt and shame so much throughout our lives that, you know, it's just what we respond to in adulthood, but we don't have to continue to respond to that stuff. We don't have to continue to respond to that stuff. So, you are responsible for what you allow into your life. The sooner you accept full responsibility for what you allow into your life and what's showing up in your life, the sooner you can get on the road to health, happiness, peace, freedom, and trust me, honey, a much better way to live. A much better way to live. Much better way to live. So again, as children, we were powerless. We're adults today. So Amy goes on to say, and you set those boundaries until you feel safe. You set those boundaries until you feel safe, secure, loved, supported, and free. You keep setting those boundaries until you feel safe, secure, loved, supported, and free. I gotta tell you that I today feel incredibly safe, supported, completely loved, and totally free, in particular emotionally and psychologically. And I don't say that to brag or boast. I'm trying to inspire you here. I'm trying to inspire you. Because believe me, that was not the way that I lived for the first three and a half decades of my life. It wasn't the way that I lived. It took some work to get me to this place, but it's a great freaking way to live. You can get there. We do not have to be the victims of highly manipulative people. And I don't care if that's your mother, your father, your adult child, your sister, your brother, your in-laws, your boss, your colleague, your best friend of 30, 40 years. I don't care who it is. It gets to be a new day where we draw a line in the sand, and guess what? I get that, you know, we've been doing this for a long time and it might take a few times for you to realize that things have changed and to take what I'm saying to you seriously. I get it. So I need to give you a fair shot. But there will be a line in the sand. There will be a line in the sand. As many of you know, and I'm not saying this is what everybody needs to do. It's not what everybody needs to do, for sure. What I needed to do. I have no contact with my family of origin at all. And, you know, for a long time, that was excruciatingly painful. I mean, for someone who was basically orphaned at a, basically, not exactly, but to a large degree at a really young age, that was excruciatingly painful. But who I have to be in order to be in those relationships is not someone I'm willing to be anymore. I'm just not willing to be that anymore. I'm not willing to carry the lies and the secrets. I'm not willing to prop you up in your bullshit, phony facade that you're projecting to the whole world. I'm not willing to engage with you when you're drunk out of your mind. I'm not willing to have you triangulate me or others in regards to me. I'm not willing to have a relationship with people who lie about me. I'm not willing to have a relationship with people who lie to me. I'm not willing to have a relationship with people who feel the need to manipulate me or anybody else all the time. Like, I'm just not willing to be who I'd have to have those relationships. And yeah, it freaking hurt. And I'd live it over again, like, you know, over and over. It was worth it to get to where I am today in terms of the peace of mind and freedom that I enjoy today. And I feel completely safe and secure and loved, completely loved. You know, when we love ourselves, when we fill ourselves up with love, the outside has to match the inside. The outside has to match the inside. So instead of looking for the love out there, what we want to do is get in touch with it and crank up the volume on it inside of ourselves. And then it'll start to show up in amazing and miraculous ways on the outside. That's the real trick. That's the real trick. where was I? So it's not wrong, it's not bad. Setting boundaries, having standards, refusing to be manipulated, refusing to be psychologically, emotionally, verbally, whatever, abused, gaslighted, scapegoated, hoovered, manipulated, whatever, there's nothing wrong. In fact, it's quite healthy. And for those of you who are believers, trust me, God's will is not for you to be engaged with highly toxic, manipulative, destructive people every day of your life. That is not God's will for your life. So the bullshit, guilt, and shame that has been manipulating you, drop it like a rock. Drop it like a rock. That is not God's will for your life. People get confused about when it's okay to stop speaking to someone or block, delete, ignore, and when it's not. Like I said, like these are not always easy decisions, right? And they're very individual decisions that we have to make for ourselves. We have to come to our own conclusions. I see Jen giving me all kinds of love there. Jen, how are you? Nice to see you. Thanks for hopping on. So, we have to be adults in our lives and come to these decisions ourselves, right? Individual decisions. But here's the simple answer according to Amy, and I completely agree with her. When you're healthy and reasonable boundaries keep getting broken, disregarded, and disrespected, and you set more, if those aren't honored. So when your very healthy, reasonable boundaries are disrespected, and you set more, and if those aren't honored, you shut the door. You shut the door. You shut the door. Nothing changes if nothing changes. Maybe some people need to spend 6 months or a year or 2 years or 5 years or 10 or 20 years, I don't know, in your absence in order to get it. And maybe they're never going to get it in this lifetime. Not your responsibility. Is it painful sometimes? Absolutely. Excruciating. Especially for those of us who are, so empathic. We love so deeply. We feel so deeply. And all we want is to have healthy, happy relationships, in particular with our family of origin. But we can't always control what we can't control. We can't control what we can't control, right? So acceptance is a big one. See it for what it is. Tell yourself the truth. If you're being manipulated, if you're not sure if you're being manipulated, get in touch with your body, because your mind will lie to you all day long and tell you what you want to hear. Your body never lies. Your body never lies. Like I started noticing at a certain point in my adult life, anytime I came anywhere near a member of my family of origin, I was dancing. Regardless of what was going on. I was dancing. I was performing. I was, out of this place that had been set up when I was itty bitty, when I was tiny. And here I am in my 30s, dancing for these freaking people, right? My body knew. Never mind what my mind was telling me, my body knew. My body knew. Pay attention to how you feel. Like they say in Al-Anon, if you think they're stoned, they're stoned. Like you don't have to second guess yourself all the time. We second guess ourselves. We don't trust ourselves, and we want to believe the bullshit. We want to believe them when they're telling us what we want to hear, but it doesn't serve us. It keeps us stuck. It keeps us in pain. It keeps us in unhealthy relationship dynamics, and it keeps us manipulated. So shut the door. Shut the door, in my humble opinion. Guys, I hope you got some value out of that. If you liked what you heard, like, comment, and or share. Once again, my name is Tamie M. I'm an empowerment coach for women. I help women break free from painful relationship patterns so they can experience the love they deserve. And I have a fabulous program that is open now. In fact, I got some of my girls on the live today. It is called The Freedom Class. It is an 8-week intensive coaching program designed to get you to where you want to be, a place of emotional and psychological freedom. freedom. Break those patterns. Break the chains that keep you stuck in those dynamics. Set yourself free. If you want some information on that, you can either drop me a comment, send me a private message, or just go to TamieMcoaching.com, Tamie, T-A-M-I-E, mcoaching.com, and all the details on the course are there, and at the bottom is a link to book a free strategy call with me. So if that's of interest to you, go check it out. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, friends, for hopping on. Mwah. Appreciate all of you. Again, if I missed anyone, my apologies. But thank you, thank you. I appreciate you for joining. And as always, I'm going to leave you with this. Know your value. Know your value and unlock your freedom. Bye for now, friends. We'll talk to you soon.